The silent broadcast. Ambassador Claire Donovan sat in her sleek, minimalist office aboard Earth's embassy ship, a far cry from the bustling streets of her home planet. The glow of the holographic reports before her illuminated her tired face. She had been working tirelessly for hours, reading through diplomatic communiques, preparing for an upcoming summit, when suddenly the quiet was shattered by an unexpected notification. Her console beeped sharply, its usual gentle hum replaced by a mechanical command that sent a chill down her spine. It was a broadcast alert from the Galactic Federation, marked with the symbol of the Supreme Council, their insignia that always felt cold and impersonal. Claire straightened in her chair, her fingers hovering over the console as she hesitated. It was a mandatory broadcast, the kind that rarely boded well. A brief moment of silence passed before the usual sterile voice of the Federation's automated system filled the room. This transmission is required for viewing by all member systems. Compliance is mandatory. Claire frowned, her gut telling her something wasn't right. She had been an ambassador long enough to know that such broadcasts usually meant a critical announcement, or worse, a declaration of some kind of military action. The lighting in the room dimmed automatically, a feature designed to enhance the realism of holographic projections. Claire's eyes narrowed as the transmission began. The vast wall in front of her flickered to life, showing a panoramic view of an unfamiliar planet. The surface appeared barren, the sky a sickly shade of red. But what caught her attention immediately was the sight of thousands of figures kneeling in rows, their bodies stiff with fear. The camera panned out further, revealing more prisoners, human prisoners, lined up along the cracked, parched earth. Their eyes, sunken with exhaustion, reflected the haunting fear of knowing what was to come. Claire's heart skipped a beat. She could see the uniforms, the medical attire that the Earth volunteers had worn when they were sent to the plague-ridden colonies across the galaxy. They had gone to heal, not to be victims of a cruel and ruthless system. The screen shifted once again, this time zooming in on a single figure standing at the forefront of the plaza, his image towering over the gathered prisoners. The hologram displayed a man dressed in a white uniform, his posture straight, radiating authority. His name was Orlan Varrock, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Federation. And to the galaxy at large, he was the face of power. A chill ran through Claire as Varrock's voice echoed through the broadcast. "Today, we bring justice to those who threaten the stability of the Federation," he announced, his tone cold and unwavering. "These individuals have been found guilty of insurrection and disobedience. They have placed themselves above the laws of the Federation, and for this, they must pay the price." Claire's hands gripped the edge of her desk as she leaned forward, her pulse racing. The prisoners were human, members of Earth's medical outreach programs that had been sent to aid plague-stricken planets in the far reaches of Federation space. She had personally signed off on their missions, confident that their work would be respected and protected. Yet, here they were, on their knees before the Federation's almighty power. As Varrock continued his speech, the sound of pulse rifles being readied filled the air. The once silent plaza seemed to hold its breath as rows of armed Federation guards, their faces impassive, raised their weapons. Claire could feel her blood run cold. She had seen this before, the Federation's merciless approach to those they deemed a threat. But this was different. The camera zoomed in on the faces of the prisoners, their eyes wide with shock, disbelief, and, in some cases, resignation. Claire recognized some of them. Dr. Sarah Langford, a renowned xenobiologist who had been researching treatments for alien diseases, Captain Kyle Davis, who had led the humanitarian mission to this planet, and Nurse Evelyn Grant, who had dedicated years of her life to saving the lives of those who could never repay her. "Let this serve as a warning to all who would defy the Federation's will," Varrock declared. "We are not here to negotiate. We are here to show that justice will be swift, and it will be final." Claire could barely hold back the surge of anger rising within her. This wasn't justice, it was murder, and it was happening before her eyes, broadcast to the entire galaxy. The Federation had just executed 50,000 innocent beings, and Earth's citizens had been caught in the crossfire. But this wasn't just a massacre. This was a message, and it was one that Claire could not ignore. The Federation had sent a signal to the entire galaxy, and more specifically, to Earth. They had just crossed a line, and Claire knew that the political repercussions would be dire. The question was, how far would Earth be willing to go to ensure such an atrocity never happened again? As the broadcast ended, the screen cut to black, leaving Claire alone in the darkened room. Her mind raced. The Federation's actions were a direct challenge to humanity's place in the galaxy. What did this mean for Earth's future? And what was her role in responding to this unprecedented act of aggression? The transmission had ended, but its impact had only just begun. The call for action. The silence in Ambassador Claire Donovan's office was deafening. As the last image of the brutal execution faded from the screen, Claire stood frozen, staring at the now black wall. Her breath came in shallow gasps, the weight of the moment settling heavily on her shoulders. For years, she had represented Earth's interests in the Galactic Federation, navigating delicate negotiations and maintaining peace in a universe teeming with political and cultural complexities. But what she had just witnessed was not a diplomatic failure. It was a direct assault on everything humanity had worked for, everything she had worked for. Her mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. The Federation's ruthless execution of 50,000 people, her people, was a deliberate act of terror. But why? And why now? Claire had always believed that the Federation, with all its flaws, operated on the principle of maintaining order across the galaxy. Yet, here they were, violating every rule of justice, every charter they had once sworn to uphold. It wasn't about rebellion or disorder. This was something far more sinister. Her thoughts were interrupted by the familiar chime of her communication console. It was the emergency frequency from Earth's central government. Claire felt a pang of dread. She knew what was coming, but even then, hearing it aloud would make it real. Ambassador Donovan. The voice of President Jason Park crackled through the speaker. "We've just seen the broadcast. The Security Council is convening immediately. We need you to report to Geneva at once." His voice, usually calm and measured, was tight with barely contained fury. "I'm already on my way, Mr. President," Claire replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing within her. "Prepare for the worst. The Federation has made its move, and I'm afraid it's only the beginning." The screen before her flickered as Claire tapped a series of commands into her desk console. The transmission from the Galactic Federation had been recorded, every second, every frame, saved to the central database. Claire knew that this evidence would be crucial. It wasn't just about responding to the loss of her people. It was about showing the galaxy that Earth would not tolerate such atrocities. Within minutes, she was on her way to Geneva, where Earth's Emergency Security Council session was being held. The situation was dire. Humanity had just witnessed the unthinkable, an organized, state-sponsored slaughter of innocents, and it was not just a threat to Earth. It was a threat to the very fabric of the galactic order. What would stop the Federation from executing similar actions against other planets? What would stop them from eradicating anyone they deemed disruptive? As Claire entered the chamber, she could feel the tension in the air. The room, usually a place of calm deliberation, was filled with representatives from Earth's government and colonies, faces grim, voices low as they discussed the recent broadcast. The usually bustling chamber had taken on a grave, almost somber tone, with all eyes on the central podium where the president and the highest-ranking officials would convene. Claire stepped to the podium, her diplomatic uniform as immaculate as ever, despite the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The chamber fell into a hushed silence as she addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and unwavering, "we have all witnessed an atrocity today. The Galactic Federation has executed 50,000 innocent beings, including 300 of our own citizens, humanitarian workers who went to distant worlds to help those in need. This was not an act of justice. It was a cold, calculated message meant to remind us of the Federation's power. They wanted us to fear them, to bow down in silence. But we will not comply. Not this time. Claire paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. She could see the disbelief in the eyes of the representatives, but she could also see the fire building behind their expressions. They were angry, and they were ready to act. "We are at a crossroads," Claire continued. "This is not just an attack on our people. It is an attack on our sovereignty, our values, and our very right to exist as a free species in this galaxy. The Federation has shown its true face, and it is not one we can ignore." A murmur rippled through the room. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Claire's heart pounded in her chest as she made her next statement. "The Federation has just declared war on us, and we cannot sit idly by. It's time we show them that humanity will no longer be a passive participant in this galaxy. We will fight for our people, for our rights, and for the future of every human being in this Federation." The chamber erupted into heated discussions. Some argued for diplomacy, for seeking a peaceful resolution, but the majority of the representatives were aligned with Claire's view. The time for diplomacy had passed. The Federation had crossed a line, and humanity had no choice but to respond. President Park stepped forward, his face stern as he addressed the room. "Ambassador Donovan is right. We cannot ignore what has happened. The Federation has committed an unforgivable act. We will not rest until justice is served, but we must also be smart. We cannot let our anger cloud our judgment. We must unite, prepare, and plan our next move carefully. The Federation's actions will not go unanswered, but we must ensure we are ready for what comes next." The room fell silent once again, as everyone in attendance understood the gravity of the situation. Humanity stood at the precipice of something much larger than a mere diplomatic conflict. What had started as a brutal broadcast had now become the spark for an intergalactic struggle. But this time, humanity wasn't going to back down. As the meeting continued into the night, plans were drafted, strategies discussed, and alliances formed. It was clear that the Federation's message had been heard, loud and clear. But what they hadn't counted on was the strength, ingenuity, and unyielding determination of humanity. The fight for Earth's future had just begun. The hidden forces. The following days passed in a blur of urgent meetings, strategic briefings, and impassioned speeches. The Security Council had declared a state of emergency, and Earth's military forces were on high alert. Ambassador Claire Donovan had been thrust into a role that demanded not only diplomatic skill, but the unwavering determination to unite Earth's many factions. Humanity's survival now depended on it. Claire sat in the briefing room, her hands steepled in front of her, as she listened to the various reports from Earth's military commanders. They had already begun mobilizing the fleet, but the challenge was clear. This wasn't going to be a conventional war. The Federation's reach extended far beyond Earth's borders, and they were ready to crush any resistance with overwhelming force. Yet Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Earth had something the Federation didn't: an edge in adaptability and ingenuity. "We need to move quickly," General Lucas Harris, the commander of Earth's space forces, said, his voice a sharp contrast to the tense atmosphere. "The Federation has already deployed fleets to key systems. We're outgunned and outnumbered. If we don't act fast, we'll be on the defensive before we even have a chance to retaliate." Claire nodded slowly, considering his words. The Federation's power was immense, but they had one critical flaw. They believed they could predict and control every aspect of the galaxy's systems. They underestimated human creativity. Humanity's ability to adapt, innovate, and turn the tables had always been their greatest strength. Claire intended to make sure the Federation felt that. "What if we don't fight them on their terms?" Claire asked, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "What if we take the fight to places they never expected us to be?" General Harris raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the idea. "What exactly do you mean?" Claire leaned forward, her eyes sharp with determination. "We need to utilize the resources we have. I'm talking about the hidden forces within the galaxy, the ones the Federation doesn't see coming. We have allies who have always kept a low profile, those who operate on the fringes. It's time we call on them. Let's not focus on matching the Federation ship for ship. Let's focus on sabotage, stealth, and disruption." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Claire had always known that the galaxy wasn't as clean-cut as the Federation liked to portray it. Beneath its polished exterior, the Federation's control was tenuous, and there were factions and rebel groups waiting for the right moment to strike. Some had resisted the Federation's expansion for years, operating in the shadows, gathering intelligence, and preparing for a fight that might one day come. One such group was the Lernak Collective, a collection of alien races that had been oppressed by the Federation's expansionist policies. They were scattered across the galaxy, living in remote, difficult-to-reach systems. The Federation had dismissed them as irrelevant, unorganized rebels, but Claire knew better. She had met with their leaders during her time as ambassador, and they had always hinted at their readiness to challenge the Federation, if only given the right cause. "Make the calls," Claire ordered. "We need to reach out to the collective. There's no time to waste. We need them in our corner." As her team scrambled to set up encrypted communications with the collective's representatives, Claire's mind continued to race. She knew that this war would be different from any humanity had faced before. It wasn't just about fighting a powerful military force. It was about breaking the Federation's carefully crafted narrative of invincibility. The galaxy had been led to believe that the Federation's control was absolute, but Claire had seen enough to know that it was a house of cards, waiting for the right push to bring it down. Meanwhile, the Federation was not sitting idly by. Supreme Commander Orlan Varrock had already begun consolidating his forces, intent on quashing any resistance to his regime. But Claire had an advantage. She understood how the Federation fought, how they operated, and she knew that they were most vulnerable when they underestimated their enemies. She remembered a conversation she had once had with Captain Leo Vallon, a decorated officer from Earth's Special Operations, who had taught her one of the most valuable lessons of her career. The Federation doesn't just fight its enemies. It dissects them. It looks for weaknesses and exploits them. If you want to win, you don't give them a weakness. You create one they never saw coming. With that in mind, Claire devised a plan. The Lernak Collective had a unique ability to manipulate subspace, the very fabric of the galaxy's communication network. With their help, Earth could disrupt Federation communications, severing their ability to coordinate military actions and intelligence. The Federation's reliance on their interconnected systems would become their biggest liability. The next morning, Claire found herself aboard the command ship Dauntless, heading toward a remote Lernak system. The fleet was still being assembled, but she knew the first step was to secure an alliance with those who had been waiting in the wings for an opportunity like this. The Lernak Collective was humanity's wild card, a hidden force capable of striking when no one expected it. As the ship moved further into deep space, Claire couldn't help but feel the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. Earth was on the brink of war, and her decisions would determine the future of her people. Yet, despite the uncertainty, she felt something she hadn't in years: hope. The Federation's brutal broadcast had sparked the fire, but Claire knew that humanity's ingenuity, resilience, and hidden alliances would be the fuel that kept it burning. The fight was just beginning, and Earth would not be silenced. As the stars outside the viewport stretched into streaks of light, Claire stood tall, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just representing Earth anymore. She was leading a resistance, one that would challenge the very core of the Federation's power. And she would not rest until justice was served. The spark of rebellion. The darkness of deep space stretched out before Ambassador Claire Donovan like an endless sea, but inside the Dauntless, a different kind of energy crackled through the air. The ship was a beacon of humanity's resolve, and as it glided silently toward the Lernak Collective's hidden stronghold, Claire felt the weight of the responsibility she now bore. The Federation had forced humanity's hand, and the ripple effects of their brutal execution of 50,000 beings were still reverberating throughout the galaxy. Yet, despite the enormity of the situation, Claire remained focused on the task at hand. Her mind was constantly calculating, strategizing, as she reviewed the communications data and the growing reports from Earth's military forces. It had become clear humanity would no longer simply react to the Federation's provocations. The time for measured diplomacy was over. They were no longer just responding to an atrocity. They were beginning a movement. Claire knew that the rebellion she was about to help lead would need more than just strength. It would require something deeper. It needed unity, clarity of purpose, and a sense of hope. The Federation had thought they could break humanity's spirit with their broadcast. They were wrong. The Lernak Collective system was a maze of ancient mining colonies and remote research stations, their locations known only to a few. It was the perfect hiding spot for the Collective, a group that had long been oppressed by the Federation's draconian policies. The Collective's leaders, a coalition of several alien species, had avoided the Federation's gaze, operating in the shadows of the galaxy. Now Claire was heading straight for them, hoping they would be the allies humanity so desperately needed. As the Dauntless neared its destination, Claire convened a final meeting with her most trusted advisors. Captain Leo Vallon, who had become her closest confidant throughout this crisis, stood at the head of the table. His sharp eyes were filled with determination, but Claire could see the faint traces of worry in the lines of his face. This mission was dangerous, not just for them, but for every species that would stand with humanity against the Federation. "We're about to enter the heart of the Lernak system," Captain Vallon said, his voice low but resolute. "This will be a delicate operation. We don't know if the Collective will be as receptive as we hope. They've had their own reasons for staying hidden, and they might not be ready to jump into open conflict just yet." Claire nodded, her mind already running through the potential outcomes. "We need them, but we also need to understand their fears. They've lived in the shadows for so long that trust won't come easily. It's not just about offering them an alliance. It's about proving we are their allies, not just another imperial force trying to control them." She paused, meeting the eyes of everyone around the table. "The Federation's strength lies in its ability to divide and conquer. We can't afford that mistake. Our unity, humanity's unity with the Lernak Collective, will be our greatest weapon." Captain Vallon acknowledged her words with a slight nod, his expression hardening with resolve. "We'll make sure the first contact is with respect and clarity. No misunderstandings. We'll send a team to their outpost to discuss terms of the alliance." As the ship made its final approach, the vast emptiness of space seemed to press down on Claire. There was no going back now. The Federation had forced her hand, but she knew that if she could secure this alliance, it could turn the tide of the conflict. The galaxy wasn't as unified as the Federation wanted to believe. There were cracks, alliances waiting to be forged, and Claire was at the center of it all. The Dauntless descended through a dense nebula cloud, and Claire watched in awe as the stars twisted into a kaleidoscope of colors, hidden behind thick mists of gas and dust. The Lernak Collective's homeworlds were deep within this cloud, secure, almost impossible to detect by Federation scanners. The perfect refuge for a people who had long since learned the value of secrecy. They arrived at an isolated station orbiting a gas giant, the first point of contact for the Collective. The station, a massive construct of metal and energy shields, was old, but it radiated an air of ingenuity. The Collective had been making do with what little they had, creating a network of hidden outposts to avoid the Federation's prying eyes. As the Dauntless docked, Claire couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation. The next few hours would determine whether humanity's resistance could take its first meaningful step toward victory. She knew the stakes were high, but there was something else, something Claire hadn't fully acknowledged until now. This was more than just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the future of freedom itself. "Are we ready?" Claire asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Captain Valen checked his equipment one last time. Ready as we'll ever be. The door to the docking bay slid open, and Claire stepped onto the alien station for the first time. The Lernak Collective had welcomed her with cautious optimism during her previous visits, but now the situation was different. She was no longer just an ambassador. She was a symbol of defiance, a symbol of a galaxy waking up to the true cost of Federation control. The first Lernak delegation arrived shortly after Claire, their figures tall and graceful, their translucent skin shimmering in the station's light. Their faces were unreadable, but Claire could sense their wariness, their guarded approach. She bowed respectfully, as she had always done in diplomatic matters. But this time there was no time for formalities. "We don't have the luxury of time," Claire said, her voice clear. "The Federation has made their move. And now we must make ours. Humanity stands with you, if you are willing to stand with us." The Lernak leader, a tall creature named Iara, regarded her silently for a moment. The air seemed to thrum with the tension of the moment. Then, at last, Iara spoke. "We have waited for someone to offer us a true alliance, but the Federation is not a force to be taken lightly. Can you promise us victory?" Claire's eyes locked onto Iara's, the weight of her answer heavy in the silence of the room. "I can promise you this. We will fight, together, and we will not stop until the Federation's reign is over." Iara studied Claire for another long moment, and then, at last, nodded. "We will join you, Ambassador Donovan. The time for hiding is over." The alliance had been forged. The rebellion had begun. The flames of rebellion. With the Lernak Collective now aligned with humanity's cause, the atmosphere aboard the Dauntless shifted. The tension that had once clouded the air was replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. The alliance between Earth and the Collective was more than just a strategic partnership. It was a symbol of defiance against the Federation's tyrannical rule. Together, they had the potential to change the course of the galaxy. Ambassador Claire Donovan stood at the bridge of the Dauntless, her hands clasped behind her back, as she gazed out at the swirling nebula ahead. Their next move was crucial. They had secured the support of the Lernak Collective, but now they needed to strike, swiftly and decisively. The Federation would not take kindly to the formation of this new alliance, and they would be coming for them soon. It was time to make their presence known. "Captain Valen, status report," Claire said, her voice calm but filled with determination. Captain Leo Valen, who had grown into an indispensable ally throughout the past few weeks, stepped forward. His expression was stern, his usually calm demeanor now sharpened by the gravity of their mission. "Our fleet is ready. The Lernak forces have mobilized, and we have gathered a significant amount of intelligence on Federation supply lines and key military installations. Our first strike will target a Federation supply depot in the Iskar system. It's one of their largest, and taking it out would cripple their ability to reinforce their forces in this sector." Claire nodded. It was a bold move. Striking at the heart of the Federation's infrastructure was risky, but necessary. The time for small tactical skirmishes was over. If humanity and the Collective were to truly challenge the Federation's dominance, they needed to hit hard, and they needed to do it now. "I agree," Claire said, her voice steady. "But we need to send a message. This strike can't just be a tactical victory. It must be a statement to the entire galaxy that humanity and its allies will no longer be cowed by the Federation. We will not be their subjects." Valen met her gaze, understanding the depth of her words. "Understood. We'll make it count." As the Dauntless and the Lernak ships prepared to move into position, Claire's thoughts turned inward. They were about to launch the first coordinated strike in what could become a prolonged conflict, a war that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. It was a daunting responsibility, but Claire had never been one to back down from a challenge. If the Federation thought they could crush Earth and its allies, they were about to find out how wrong they were. The fleet exited the nebula and entered the Iskar system, a barren expanse of rocky planets and asteroid fields. The Federation's supply depot was located on a fortified space station orbiting a gas giant. From the intelligence they had gathered, Claire knew that the station was heavily guarded, but not invulnerable. The Federation's overconfidence in their control made them blind to the potential threat that humanity and the Lernak Collective now posed. "Time to light the fire," Claire muttered to herself as she watched the glowing station grow larger on the view screen. "Captain, ready the fleet," Claire ordered, her voice firm. "We move in 5 minutes." The tension aboard the Dauntless was palpable as the crew prepared for the strike. The Lernak ships moved into position alongside Earth's fleet, their unique technology adding an edge to the force. The collected ships were smaller, more agile, capable of using subspace distortions to evade detection and strike from unexpected angles. It was a perfect complement to Earth's more conventional warships, creating a force that was both powerful and unpredictable. "Ambassador, we're in position," Captain Valen reported. "Commencing the attack now." The Dauntless surged forward, and with it, the combined fleet, a series of tactical drones launched from the ships, their sensors glowing as they locked onto the Federation station. Claire's heart pounded as she watched the events unfold. The Federation's security systems had not yet detected their presence, and their first wave of attacks was met with only minimal resistance. The Lernak ships moved in, phasing in and out of subspace, making them almost invisible to the Federation scanners. In moments, they struck the outer defenses of the supply depot, disabling its external weapons platforms and communication systems. The Federation's response was sluggish. They were unprepared for the intensity of the assault. Direct hit to their power core. One of the engineers called out from the control room, his voice filled with excitement. "We've got them. The station's going dark." The Federation station, once a symbol of their overwhelming power, was now in disarray. The explosion had sent shockwaves through the station, knocking out its primary systems and leaving it vulnerable. The Federation forces aboard the station scrambled to mount a defense, but it was too late. The Dauntless and the Lernak ships swooped in, their weapons pounding the station's remaining defenses into submission. The Federation tried to retaliate with a barrage of energy blasts, but the Dauntless was already pulling back, having dealt the first significant blow. The station was crippled, its ability to provide support to Federation forces in the region effectively neutralized. "We've done it," Claire breathed, a rush of triumph flooding her veins. This was the first victory, small, perhaps, but crucial. It sent a clear message to the Federation. Humanity and its allies were not to be underestimated. But the battle was far from over. Claire knew that this was just the beginning. The Federation would retaliate. They would try to crush the rebellion before it gained momentum. But with the Lernak Collective now firmly in their corner, and humanity's military might in full force, Claire felt the spark of rebellion grow into a roaring fire. The Federation had no idea what was coming for them. As the fleet returned to their hidden base, Claire stood once again at the bridge, looking out at the stars. There was no turning back now. The fight for the future had begun, the heart of the storm. The victory at Iskar was just the beginning, but as the days turned into weeks, the galaxy began to change in ways Ambassador Claire Donovan hadn't expected. The Federation's initial shock over the destruction of their supply depot was swift, but the retaliation came faster. They had underestimated the resolve of humanity and the Lernak Collective. And as Claire watched the Federation's next moves unfold, she couldn't help but feel a mix of both dread and anticipation. The Federation would come for them. They always did. But this time, they weren't dealing with scattered resistance. This time, they were facing the united front, one forged in the fires of injustice. The Dauntless was once again in motion, now accompanied by an armada of ships from Earth, the Lernak Collective, and several smaller independent systems that had seen the power of their alliance and decided to join the cause. The war had spread, no longer confined to skirmishes in the Outer Rim. Each action they took, each strike against the Federation's power, sent ripples throughout the galaxy. The time had come to act on a larger scale. In a hidden sector of space, a secret rendezvous was taking place. Claire stood on the command deck of the Dauntless, reviewing the intelligence gathered over the past few weeks. The Federation had started consolidating their forces, retreating from their forward bases to focus on a massive counteroffensive. Their new target was clear: the heart of the rebellion itself, Earth. "We need to get to them before they get to us," Captain Leo Valen said, his face tense as he surveyed the tactical map. The Federation's fleet had been moving through space in large coordinated formations, closing in on Earth's home system. Their plans to strike had become more organized. A decisive blow against the homeworld would cripple humanity's resolve. It was a target they couldn't afford to miss. Claire's mind raced. It wasn't just Earth that was at risk. It was the future of every species fighting for freedom against the Federation's empire. The stakes couldn't be higher. But Claire was no longer the cautious diplomat she had once been. She was a leader of a rebellion, one that had to act swiftly and decisively, or else risk being snuffed out in its infancy. "We can't wait for the Federation to come to us," Claire said, her voice cold with resolve. "We have to take the fight to their doorstep. There's a Federation command hub on Sinus IV, a staging ground for their forces. If we can hit that, we'll disrupt their command structure, scatter their fleets, and force them to retreat." The room fell silent as the officers absorbed her words. It was a bold move, perhaps too bold. Sinus IV was heavily guarded, its surface bristling with Federation defenses. It was the very nerve center of their operations in this sector. A direct assault would be risky, but Claire knew there was no other option. If they didn't act now, Earth would be next. General Harris, the grizzled commander of Earth's military forces, leaned in. "We've trained for this, but we'll need full coordination with the Lernac ships. Their subspace technology is our best chance of avoiding detection until we're right on top of them." Claire nodded. The Lernac collected ships, though smaller, had the unique ability to manipulate subspace distortions, allowing them to slip past Federation scanners undetected. It was a perfect countermeasure to the Federation's reliance on technology to track and monitor every corner of space. Together with Earth's advanced fleet, the combined forces would have a fighting chance. But Claire couldn't shake the thought that they might be walking into a trap. The Federation wouldn't leave their command hub unguarded. They knew they were coming. The question was, how could they possibly be prepared for an attack of this magnitude? "We're risking everything on this," Claire said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of the decision. "But if we succeed, we turn the tide of this war. This will be the moment the Federation realizes they are not invincible." With a nod from the assembled officers, the plan was set into motion. The fleet departed the hidden base under the cover of darkness, the stars stretching into lines as they leaped into hyperspace. Claire stood at the helm of the Dauntless, her gaze fixed on the swirling vortex of the jump. Every fiber of her being was focused on what was to come. The Federation had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. As they neared Sinus IV, the tension in the air was palpable. The Federation had already begun moving their fleets into position, preparing for a final showdown. The time for subtlety had passed. Claire had no choice but to go in full force. The ships aligned, the fleet prepared for entry into the heart of the Federation's territory. The attack began with brutal precision. The Lernac ships made their move first, slipping undetected through subspace, striking Federation patrols in a series of rapid ambushes that caused confusion and chaos. The Federation's fleets, scattered by the surprise attack, were unable to regroup in time to stop the onslaught. Meanwhile, the Dauntless and the rest of the Earth fleet hit the ground running, their weapon systems unleashing waves of laser fire, energy beams, and missiles at the heart of the Federation's defenses. The Federation's command hub, once a symbol of their strength, now found itself under siege. "I've never seen anything like this," one of the crew members said in disbelief as the battle raged on the view screen. "They're falling apart." For a moment, it felt like victory was within their grasp. But Claire knew better. The Federation's ability to counterattack was swift, and they were already beginning to regroup. The final stages of the operation would be the hardest. The Federation wasn't just fighting for their control of the galaxy. They were fighting for survival. And in their desperation, they would stop at nothing to crush the rebellion before it could grow any stronger. Claire's heart pounded as she watched their forces close in, the desperation of the moment rushing through her veins. The fleet pushed deeper into Sinus Ivy's heavily fortified perimeter, dodging energy blasts and avoiding Federation reinforcements. Claire's tactical genius was in full display, using every move, every diversion, every advantage they had. This battle wasn't just about firepower, it was about momentum. As the Federation's defense systems began to collapse, Claire could see the future. They had dealt the Federation a massive blow. But there was more to be done. The rebellion had sparked, and now it would spread like wildfire. The Federation would never be the same again. And neither would the galaxy.